I know this sounds like a kind of stupid question to ask, but it's actually kind of nuanced and I promise kind of interesting. Gen 9 is no stranger to controversial or at least unexpected theorings, like Tyranitar falling from OU to UU, or Darkrai now being legal in OU after being an Uber for so many years. So I'm going to be answering the question, would non-Truant Slaking be legal or even be good in Gen 9 OU if it didn't have that god-awful ability? So we're going to be assuming that Slaking has Vital Spirit, because that's what his pre-evolution has, and it's the most logical assumption. So Vital Spirit is not a useless ability, technically, but in the context of Gen 9 OU, well yeah, it's a little bit useless, because it stops you from falling asleep, and sleep is currently banned. So yes, it's kind of useless, and honestly that's not bad, but there are Pokemon who don't technically have an ability that are kind of going pretty far, okay, that's not true. But unlike those Pokemon, they don't have a stat spread like he does. So let's analyze that. He has a base stat total of 670. Currently, the Pokemon with the highest base stat totals are Zamazenta and Kyurem at 660. So he beats them out by 10 points. It's not technically a lot, but it really shows how far the OU tier has gone. But it is significant because he does set a record in doing this. Speaking of attack stats in general, not just physical but special and physical, he would be tied for the highest attack stats with Hoopa Unbound. So no record there, but it's still pretty impressive. Slaking is also a pretty bulky Pokemon, with the special defense stat being his worst stat at 95, which is still pretty good, and his HP stat being 150. That means that he has the 10th highest HP stat in current Gen 9. On top of that, he has 100 base speed, which I feel like 100 base speed isn't as good as it was before, obviously, and I wonder if it should still be called the benchmark for what we consider a fast Pokemon, but it is definitely very solid, and with Scarf, he would be able to outspeed many other Pokemon. Bottom line, it's honestly kind of min-max for competitive play, which is obviously why it gave him this ability. Next is move pools. I was expecting him to have a solid move pool, but wow, this is a really great move pool. Some notable moves that he has are Double Edge, Body Slam, Earthquake, Drain Punch, Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Gunk Shot, Heavy Slam, Knockout, Low Kick, Outrage, Rock Slide, Seed Bomb, Sucker Punch, Trailblaze, X Scissor, and Zen Headbutt. On top of that, he would also have Protect, Slack Off, Substitute, Taunt, and Thunder Wave. He not only has amazing coverage for literally anyone in the tier, but also has the ability to maybe not double as a utility mon, but does have great utility moves. With these moves, he has moves for Golden Go, Great Tusk, King Gambit, Cinderace, Darkrai, Dragapult, etc. And it's not only that, but it's the fact that he has reliable recovery and Slack Off is really huge. And that's just talking about physical moves. While you would ideally use those, there would probably be variants that would try to use the special attack stats, as he has access to Ice Beam, Flamethrower, Focus Splash, Shadow Ball, Thunder, etc. Literally, there's only two moves that I can think of that would make him better, being Extreme Speed and U-Turn, which in my opinion actually holds him back a lot more than you might think, because the best Pokemon this gen, like Cinderace, have pivot moves. Speaking of, popular Terra types, besides the obvious ones like Water and Fairy and Ghost to help with his weaknesses, would also be normal. Think of Terra, Normal, Ursaluna for a solid comparison. To give you a clear idea with some numbers, Terra Normal Double Edge on a Great Tusk could do up to 69% of his HP, and off of a Choice Band, it almost OHKOs it. Almost, not quite. Not quite Ursaluna level damage, which is something I want you to remember. As much as Slaking has a very impressive attack stat, it doesn't quite get to the levels that Ursaluna can do damage-wise, and we're going to be using her a lot for comparison. And speaking of Choice Band, that and Scarf are two items I can potentially see being very popular on him. With the Choice Band, its attack stat goes all the way to 639 with an admin nature. And with the Choice Scarf, it would be able to outspeed many non-Scarf threats as I talked about. However, Slack Off wouldn't fit well on those sets, and reliable recovery is very useful for him, but we'll talk about that more later. This all seems very good, so he would be way too good for the OU tier, right? Well, first off, his typing. He doesn't have an awful typing, but normal isn't spectacular, so how would that affect him? Currently, there's only one normal type in the OU tier in Blissey, and there are 3 fighting types in the OU tier, 2 of which I would say their presence is kind of overwhelming in Great Tusk and Zamazenta. Great Tusk has a usage rate of 33%, as I'm scripting this, and Zamazenta has one of 20%. Then Iron Valiant has one of 12. The fact that the number 2 Pokemon in the format has an advantage over him isn't great, sure, but that would probably mean that he would either want to run Ice Punch or Play Rough for coverage. But what about other Pokemon, like Corviknight and Skarmory, who are the go-to physical walls this gen? Particularly Skarmory would definitely be an obstacle in their paths. Besides that, Dondozo would also be a huge threat. Let's look at some more numbers. An Adamant Nature Slaking would do 37% of damage on a physically defensive Corviknight without a Choice Band, and it does 46 to 50 with a Choice Band by using Thunder Punch. On the contrary, Body Press without an Iron Defense does 37 to 44%. So we get similar numbers from Skarmory with a Choice Banded Thunder Punch doing 48 to 57, and a non-Choice Banded Thunder Punch does 32 to 39. And a Body Press from Skarm would hit him at about 43.5 to 51% damage. Then Dondozo. A Double Edge from him would actually do a lot more than a Thunder Punch, as a Double Edge would do 28 to 33% damage, and a Thunder Punch would only do 23.4 to 27.7. With a Body Press from Dondozo without a Curse, it would hit Slaking at 40 to 47% damage. Needless to say that he would be really reliant on a Choice Band, and this would be a pivotal item for him, but still, a Scarf would be major help. So you would have to choose between those two. Anyways, I've been talking a lot about coverage moves, and this leads me to a second concern. I can't help but feel like he would be a victim of the 4th slot syndrome. 4-move slot syndrome is a situation where a Pokemon has multiple good moves, but it can only pick certain ones, limiting its offensive or utility capabilities. I'll go more in depth a little later, but it seems like he could potentially have a hard time with the offensive moves to pack. If he does decide to go with a Choice Band, that means that he would not be able to use Slack Off and would lose reliable recovery. And we would really like Slack Off. And if we decided to go with Slack Off, then Choice Banded would probably not be the best option, and you would have a bit more trouble breaking through threats like Skarmory and Corviknight, or just other Pokemon in general. It makes things a little bit more complicated. It's not that he can't be an effective Pokemon, and it's not that he can't be an effective Pokemon if he's walled by certain Pokemon. King Gambit, the best Pokemon in the format, is walled by Dondozo, and he's obviously still very good. But it would unfortunately mean, and again, you could technically use Slack Off on a Choice Band or a Scarf set, that just wouldn't be super pragmatic though. To avoid getting walled by these Pokemon, like I said, you would have to start picking Thunder Punch, Play Rough, or Ice Punch. For other Pokemon who could cause trouble for it, I didn't mention could also be Pokemon like Landorus, Tinglu, and Gliscor, who have usage rates of 30%, 17%, and 12%. Overall, it's kind of easier in my opinion to have a special attacker rather than a physical attacker this gen. He would also need to fear being Will-O-Wisp by Moltres, who has had a recent surge in viability, and Dragapult, as well as Skelledridge potentially, all being Pokemon that could cause trouble for him. All that being said, that's still a very high attack stat at the end of the day. Anyways, I wanted to expand on Terra again, would be one of his biggest strengths, particularly the Terra Normal, because a double-edged Terra Normal could be devastating, as well as Terra Fire to avoid being Will-O-Wisp. That being said, could also kind of be deemed a Terra Hog, and I already went through when he uses Terra Normal, and how although it would do major damage, it still wouldn't get to the level of damage that Ursaluna can do with her Terra Normal attacks. And if Terra Normal wasn't enough for Ursaluna to get banned, I don't know why it would be much more different for Slaking, who doesn't even do that much damage. I want to keep talking about Ursaluna as well as Garganacl. If you remember, there was a time where people genuinely wanted Garganacl to be banned because Salt Cure plus Terra was deemed kind of a diabolical combo, but now it's not even ranked OU, it's ranked UU. And Ursaluna, who was once deemed so powerful and people wanted it banned, is not even ranked OU anymore, it's ranked UUBL. All this to say, some people tend to overstate the power of some Pokemon and be a little bit dramatic, and I feel that to some extent, that's kind of what's happening here with Slaking. Although you would think he would technically be banned to Ubers, I feel like his power is kind of being a little bit too hyped up. I mean, some Pokemon in Gen 9 are genuinely insane. I don't think I need to remind you Darkrai is in Gen 9 and has a special attack stat equal to the ones of Miraidon. Golden Ho has a higher special attack stat than Magnira, who's ranked Ubers, and Ursaluna has a higher attack stat than Ho-Oh, and it's not even ranked OU. I understand that numbers don't tell the whole story. For example, Hoopa Unbound is ranked RUBL. Even though it has the highest special attack in the whole game, it's higher than legendaries like Necrozma, Groudon, and Rayquaza. But it also has subpar speed and a 4x weakness to U-turn. I acknowledge Pokemon has a complex game and it's a lot more than just raw numbers. Like for example, even though Ursaluna was very powerful with its Terra Normal attacks, and even stronger than Slaking, like I said, it had limited longevity because of Guts and because of Flame Orb, and was stuck on Trick Room, so it fell off. Overall, going back to Slaking, If Ursaluna, who has a stronger normal type attacks and immunity to Volt Switch, and even has a better ability than him in this hypothetical scenario, wasn't banned, I feel like Slaking wouldn't be banned either. Or let's take a Pokemon like Greninja. Greninja has an even better move pool than Slaking, a better ability, and was ranked in Ubers, but now he's ranked UU. This is relevant because in the move pool regard and then the impressive stats regard, he's similar to Slaking. But this is just to show that Gen 9 is really not kind to anyone, so it might illustrate how Slaking may not be all of that. I kind of feel like people just kind of got used to viewing Slaking as overpowered without his ability, and they forgot that things have really gotten crazy in the OU tier recently. But I don't feel like it would actually be that overpowered personally, or at least I don't think he would be that much better than Ursaluna. And even outside of the context of the OU tier and the UU tier, there are Pokemon that would keep him in check, like Skeledridge, as I talked about, Toxapex, Galarian Slowking, and Petrand. In terms of physical attackers, there's no lack of them, and Tyranitar, Excadrill, Ogerpon, Quaquaval, and Metagross, who are all ranked UU. So controversial opinion, I don't think Non-Truant Slaking would be that powerful. Or at least, I think there's a good chance that he would probably end up being in the UUBL tier, or at least on the lower end of the usage rates in the OU tier. So that's the end of my short hypothetical analysis. Feel free to disagree, although it would be really cool if you didn't.